Fala, Wanderson. Como é que tá, irmão? Hey, everyone. So, we're going to have a friend of mine jump in over here in a few seconds, just waiting for her to join. And it's a good friend of mine, Katya, who just want to have a cool little conversation and tell you what it's about as soon as she jumps on. But how's everybody going so far? Love from Bangladesh. Love from Miami. Back to you guys. There we go. There's Katya. Love back to you guys.
Coca-Cola. Amigo. Yeah,
Hello. And it worked.
yeah,
Amazing.
it did. Where's my so it looks like my
Awesome.
headphones don't work with this. Weird. Anyways, no headphones in.
But can you hear me
So how are
properly?
you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Cool.
Morning here in Mexico. It's been raining a
And
bit, but beautiful day.
what exactly is the name of the city again?
Well, right now I'm in Tulum, but most of the
Into
time I live in Akumal, which is close to Tulum in the jungle.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like in between Playa and Tulum, basically, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the jungle where it's not quite as hectic, a bit more nature, a bit more
And not
solitude.
quite the opposite of hectic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you?
And I'm doing great. And so everybody knows I'm actually going to be with Katya in the jungle in Akumal in what is it, like a week and a half, a week or so? Yeah,
Yeah,
24th. Yeah, so really looking forward to that because this is going to be just one more of my many inward journeys and crazy adventures that I've had this year. I've done plenty of them, and I'm looking forward to having one more with you.
yeah. Looking forward to having you. So, yeah, it turns out like both of us are, maybe to give you guys a bit of background, both of us are very deep into plant medicine, and that's also actually how we connected. The way how we connected was also quite synchronistically, right? So,
Very
should
much
I
so.
share?
Yeah, you should.
So, I didn't know Dom until a few weeks ago, and I was on Instagram and I just came across a video of someone sharing something about a dark cave retreat, and I listened for 5 seconds, and while I listened, I got this intuitive insight that you need to sit with the Huni Queen, which is like super weird. I had no idea who he was, but I learned that when it feels like that and when my intuition is knocking, that I need to follow through. So I reached out, and you were actually saying that the Huni Queen is one of the tribes you haven't sat with, and that yeah, that this has been on your mind for the last week. So I've been, I don't know, tapped into that, and that's how we connected. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, very much. And just so anybody listening can actually follow along with that, because that terminology is probably not going to be familiar to most people.
no,
In the plant medicine world, these traditions go back to a lot of different um, indigenous and ancient cultures. They're not all the same, right? I mean, when you start getting into plant medicine a little more, you start recognizing that there's not one size fits all approach to working with these teachers and working with these plants, and that the same way uh, we dress differently and the same way we speak differently all across the world. Our approach to plant medicine is also very, very, very different from one tradition and one tribe to another. And some of these are in Colombia, some of them are in Brazil, some of them are indigenous to Peru. And obviously, it's to be expected that they're very different from each other. And the Huni Queen is actually a tradition that I have not sat with, like you were saying. And like you mentioned, I had just very recently also met someone who I've been sitting with lately, who was formally trained by the Huni Queen for a very long time, and just how good it felt to be in her presence and to, just, we didn't to have like a traditional Huni Queen ceremony, but just the fact that I know that that is part of, what guides how she approaches ceremonies nowadays, and that, made me enjoy that and be more curious about it. I'm also very curious about the Ubandaimi. And so, yeah, when you reached out to me, I was like, wait, what? I just look at my DMs, which I never really checked the requests, and I was like, wait a second. Okay, we got to look into this a little more.
Yeah, well, and then we like started talking and noticed that we have like so many interests in common when it comes to psychedelic journeys, psychedelic
Yeah,
exploration, plant medicine, etc. That we also share similar views on many things, like the intentionality, for example, and the kind of seriousness with which we approach this work.
for sure. I think we both view it as, it's certainly not a game. It's not something that you take lightly, that you approach lightly. It's I as much as this has been a part of my life path, and it's very much shaped my life, and I think it's improved it to the better. I also don't walk around preaching that this is something that people need to do and that everybody should be doing it, and I've gotten the feel that you kind of have that respect for these teachers as well, and this understanding that you kind of have to wait for the right time in your life, and you can't push other people to do it. So I like to share my experiences. I like to share little things that I've learned with people, and then they make that decision, whatever it may or may not even come to them. you know and what I also thought was very interesting too, when I spoke to you the first time, but when we first jumped on the phone, it was like a 2 hour call, I think. It's like, hey, random person from
Yeah.
Instagram, let's jump on a call. And then spoke to each other for at least 2 hours, I think, that day. And in that conversation, I also got a really interesting feel that you are probably equally as adventurous and like not scared to try new things as I was. A lot of people, like, even if they start jumping into the plant medicine world, they'll try one teacher and then they'll kind of stick to that, and they don't want to jump into new things. And I respect the approach of waiting for that teacher to come to you, and that's the approach a lot of people take. But I also think there's value in more of a searching it out, seeking it out. Like, if it doesn't come to me, I'm going to go find out about that. I'm going to do a little research. I'm going to go chase after it. And it sounds like you've had a wide array of experiences as well. And that's kind of a feeling that I get from you.
Yeah, well, I'm also quite curious, and this is part of the work that I do. I'm a transformation coach and a plant medicine guide. So, knowing the different medicines and the effect of it, how the journey is with them, is part of my work. But at the same time, I also really view it that, I mean, now there's this psychedelic renaissance happening and everybody's talking about it. And that might very easily create the assumption that this is something everyone has to try, that everyone needs to do it. And I also see that around here, there's almost a lot of, like, call it ayahuasca tourism, where people go into it for the wrong reasons, not really knowing what they get themselves into, just going because someone told them, oh, I had so many amazing visuals in my journey and you need to try that. But what I tell people and what I want them to know when they prepare is this is like serious. And you need to know why you do it. And just because you want to see how it is might not be enough, because it also opens you up. It opens Pandora's box, and you don't know what will come up, what will show up. And you need to be ready to receive what's there for you to receive. And if this willingness and readiness is not there, then maybe it's not the right time yet, and also not everyone needs to do it. It's not on everyone's path. But if you want to explore it, I really invite you to do that with a lot of intentionality and know why you're doing it, because the intention is also what will carry you through maybe the moments where it gets a bit more challenging.
Sure. Well, do you mind sharing with us a little more about exactly what you do and how you integrate plant medicine into your coaching?
Yeah. So I basically, within my coaching practice, I work with people who are in a transition phase in life, who are maybe thinking about the next chapter, a redirection, who are in some form of change, and who also want to go into a deep self-exploration. So one of the tools they can use is plant medicine. Of course, that's not like the only thing, but plant medicine or psychedelics in general, I work a lot with plant medicine, but psychedelics in general, they are like a door opener. They allow you to step out of your normal thinking, the default mode network. They really allow you to view yourself from an outside perspective, to maybe view patterns in you, to recognize moments that have been important, to recognize topics that are important that you have not been able to see due to your conditioning and to your thinking patterns. So that can be very powerful. And at the same time, like opening your mind and tapping into this altered state and knowing that there's way more out there shouldn't be the only way to rely on. So it's about, in my opinion, opening those doors, and then for each individual finding ways how to get back to that state, how to get back to this open-mindedness through different means, for example, that are not substance related. This could be meditation, could be breath work. There's so many amazing tools out there. And yeah, within that, within the transformation work, where it's about deep inner work, sustainable change, really connecting to what's authentic for you, what you want to create from the inside out, what's your purpose, why you're here, to weave that in if someone is interested in plant medicine. And I do that in coachings, but I also create and facilitate retreats, transformational immersions, where people come in for a few days, like now soon in Akumal, and we'll look at the topic of transformation from different angles, have different practices, and plant medicine is then just one part of it.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, there's so much that I want to add to that you just said, but mainly the first thing is, I 110% agree with you that, like, if anybody is even looking at the possibility of integrating plant medicine into their life, that you can't look at it as a pill that's going to fix things like we're used to looking at in Western medicine, right? Like, we think that I have a problem, I'm going to take this external substance, it is now going to fix the issue that I have, and it fixes it in a passive way. I'm not doing anything active. And it's the Pandora's box you were talking about, that is a danger, right? Because it's like, if anybody jumps into that with the expectation that they're not going to have to do a lot of work, it's actually going to open a lot of doors for you to have to do a lot of work that you didn't want to do before, that you were okay with not doing before, because out of ignorance, you're just, hadn't seen a bigger picture, and you're okay with not doing, or with living a certain way. And then all of a sudden you just kind of take those horse blinds off and you're like, oh shit, wait a second. Now, if I go back to the same behavioral patterns that I was in before, now not only are they hurting me in the way that they already were before, but on top of that, there's like this guilt feeling and this weight on your conscience that it's like, no, I know better. I can't be doing this anymore, but I don't have the balls to change it. And that's kind of where that Pandora's box starts, right? It's like, okay, well, now I need to bring these back into the material world somehow, because it doesn't help me. Nobody gets anything out of going there for a few hours, moments, and coming back to exactly where you were before. It has to, where we want to have these lessons from the 5D, but ultimately we're like these 3D bodies walking around in this 3D experience, and you need to bring the lesson back here and actually impact some change. And that's where like the ceremony begins. It's like after you're done, now all of a sudden you have like a 2-year ceremony coming up that you didn't even know, that maybe you weren't ready to jump into, On the other hand, though, I have like mixed feelings about how I feel in term about people just trying it out just to try it out. I think sometimes it can open that Pandora's box that you're not really willing to deal with. But on the other hand, sometimes it's just kind of like that little kick in the butt that you needed. For me, that's kind of how it worked. When I initially came across these, I didn't have the view that I have nowadays about them. I was just kind of going in just for shits and giggles. And ultimately, though, I think that if I hadn't gone through those experiences, it wouldn't just kind of have opened the door to the possibility. And I probably would. I don't know if I would have embarked on this journey. Sometimes it's kind of like if you're trying to learn, I think people have different learning methods. Some people, if you're trying to learn how to swim, you can just push them in the water and say, hey, figure it out, And some people, if you do that, they're going to drown. So it's tricky. I know in my case, I feel like I'm a little bit more of the, you can push me in the water and I'll figure it out. So that worked for me. There's a lot of people, and whenever I bring up the topic with somebody, I try to understand that. I try to get a feel for that with them. Like, okay, are you the type of person that I could just say, hey, come over here, I'm going to show you a little something, and then you can figure it out from there? Or are you going to, like, is this just going to be way too overwhelming for you, and is it going to make you worse? And it's not. There's no easy answer to that.
No, and I also know so many people who came on that path through maybe the more recreational setting and getting into that. And there's also nothing wrong with that. What I consider very important in that context, though, is really creating a safe setting and knowing at least the basics and knowing how to prepare so that you can make sure that you are safe and that you will have the best possible outcome or the best setting for it if you go into it for the first time as well. So considering where you're at, like mentally, emotionally on that day, but also where you do it, the substance and so on. So that's in my opinion then one that not everyone has on the radar, but that shouldn't be neglected yet. And of course, everyone is coming in from different angles, and as you said, without you coming in from that direction, you would never be where you're at now. So that's also totally legit.
Yeah, because what I see a lot of times is people, like sitting but not shitting and getting off the pot. It's like they want to do it. They're curious about it. They know it would benefit them somehow, but they just sit around waiting like, oh, well, it's not the perfect scenario. It's not the perfect time. It's like, oh, I'm scared. I don't know these people. And, and sometimes you just kind of have to throw yourself out there a little bit. There's, on one hand, I recommend that people do a lot of homework and find their safe container to go work with this, and really figure out why it is that you're doing it. On the other hand, I've seen a lot of people sit around and consider the idea for 5, 6, 7 years and, never really pull the trigger just because they're scared of something. I think it really just goes back to, recognizing, are your decisions coming from fear, or your lack of decision in this case? Is it coming from a place of fear, or is it coming from a place of responsibility? Are you actively trying to, look into this more? Are you doing the work to try to figure out what's a good container, trying to make those connections? Or are you just frozen. You know, some people will do that, you know, myself included. Sometimes you're just scared to take a decision, and so you just sit there and you don't take one.
And you can relate that to anything, right? Not only
Yeah.
like plant medicine journeys. So many people in life are at the point where they actually know they feel drawn to make a move to explore a certain area in life to change directions, but they're waiting for the right time because they are too scared or it's too much of out of being out of the comfort zone to make the
Yeah.
move.
Right.
Um, it's a choice.
It's
It's a
never the right
choice.
time to change it, to drop your job and start your own business. It's never the right time to, I don't know, to move. It's never the right time to, I don't know, have kids. You're never ready for that. It's, you know, you can't always just sit there passively waiting for it.
Yeah, but in the end, also kind of our time here and our human experience is limited. So then if you ask yourself the question at the end of my life, like, what do I want to look back onto? Do I want to look back on and maybe even like regret things I have not had the courage to do? Or do I just like go for it and
Mhm.
deal with the discomfort and adapt and trust in myself that I will level up to that new version of me?
Sure. And, you know, I think there's different types of people, and different people need to take different approaches. You know, I don't know how much I believe in astrology, for example, but, you know, to kind of draw an analogy, there are different signs and different, you know, personality types. And some people are just going to do better with taking different approaches. You know, for me, my life has always been about just balls to the wall. Like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to go do it. And if it doesn't work out, then it didn't work out. But it's an experience that I learned, you know, like not everything that I've done worked out the way I wanted to, but it's totally okay because I have this philosophy that if I'm sitting here in this little square and I know it's not ideal for me, like I don't like it, well, I could go to this other one where it could be worse or it could be better, you know, but I don't know. But then I can always come back. Like there's nothing keeping me from coming back. And then, you know what, maybe the next one sucks and then maybe I'll move on again. And maybe that sucks. And maybe the next one sucks even more. But eventually I will know that I'll find, even if I have to come back to where I originally was, I come back here with like that knowledge that I tried these other things. And now I'm not sitting here wondering what I could, you know, what could have happened or what could have been if I had tried to take a different direction. But I
Yeah,
don't know that
very often
everybody,
we
you know, works that
totally
for everybody.
underestimate like what, like in my experience, like most of the time things are even way better than you could have imagined.
Mhm.
But you would have never gotten there if you hadn't taken the first step.
Yeah.
So most of the time, if I also look at my own journey where I'm now, if someone would have told me I'll be living in Mexico in the jungle, hosting plant medicine retreats for people 5 years ago when I was still in a corporate career, I would have said like, no way, are you crazy? But now so many things aligned and it's way more aligned with who I am and what I actually wanted to do. But I would have never thought that this is possible in that context. So when you take that step and you like take the next step and then you take the next step, in the end, life unfolds in a very mysterious and also very synchronistic way, right?
Totally.
Synchronicity, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, paying attention to those synchronicities, right? Like really tapping into it. It's something that takes a lot of practice, and especially from somebody like me who kind of like lives in such a pragmatic, masculine, logical part of their body and their soul and their mind. You know, it takes a lot of takes a good ass kicking to
Mm.
really get to the point where you pay attention to those and you give them the proper attention and importance that they deserve. You know, I just got through the book The Alchemist for I don't know how many times I've read it. It's like one of my favorite books, and it's like I recommend it to everybody that comes across me. And I just like I love how in that book the guy who's you know the main subject of the book, he just tries all of these different things, and at one point he's like a shepherd, and then You know, he's just he gets the sign. He's like, you know what? I got to take off and go do something else. And then he takes off and he's like, just wandering around and doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And then he becomes like a merchant and at this store. And then like he makes a ton of money. And it's like, wow, this is going so well. But he's like, he feels in his heart that like he's got to go do something else. So he just drops it all over again. He's like, you know what? Start over from scratch. And then he goes and he does something else. And then he makes a bunch of money again. It's like, damn, I'm making so much money. I'm good. I could just sit here and relax and just rest on the laurels, right? Like rest on all of the work that I've done so far. But he knows that like if he stays there in that same spot, like that's gonna come around and bother him. So he says, fuck it, and he takes off all over again. And he loses all of it, everything so many times in the book. And I think that's so cool. It's like when you recognize that whenever you start something over, whenever you start something new, better said, and then you kind of lose everything, you're not starting over from zero. You're starting over from zero plus all of the experience that you've gained from that. And it's not that like if you start your first business and you fail, starting the second business is not as hard as it was to start the first one, because even though you might be zeroed out, like maybe even negative financially, like there's so much wealth in there from that experience that you took that, you're not back at zero. You're not at square one again.
Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites as well, and
Yeah.
such an inspiration. I'm curious because you said with your more masculine energy, it took a while until you picked up on synchronicity. How does it like show for you? Is there a certain way how, like when something happens energetically that okay, now I should pay attention?
Well, a lot of it has actually been very recent. As much as I had worked with plant medicine, and that really opens up a side of your heart and your how in tune you are with your energy in general. And I had still didn't matter. Like I still stayed very much so in this very grounded masculine state, and just very recent, I would say that one of the biggest things that made the biggest difference was actually a little work that I did with somebody during the darkroom retreat. I had been making some good progress before that, but then I don't think there's a name for the modality or the type of work that she was doing, which it felt kind of like it was like a psychologist talking to me almost, but then like also with doing energy work, and I did a lot of work on just kind of like.
That was while you were in the dark cave retreat?
I'm sorry?
And that was while you were in the dark
No,
cave
before
retreat?
and after. So
Okay.
right before I went in, and at the very tail end of it, when I got out, we had like, I kind of had half a day to acclimate and get used to the sunlight again and everything. And then we did another little session before going to bed that day. And, when you have a certain feeling, whether you're angry, whether you're sad, whether you're happy, good emotions, bad emotions, it doesn't matter. Like there's a corresponding something going on in your body, right? That you can, with enough practice, you can kind of learn to attune to. And I was completely ignored all of that, and I think what it caused was, for example, just in one way it affected me was there would be, if there's a negative emotion and you kind of feel it somewhere here, you have that knee-jerk reaction to like push it away. And what that causes, like first of all, you can't learn from it. Second of all, you tend to react. And then, so, I was kind of like doing a lot of work on just like paying more attention to that. And to the point that you brought up, the question that you asked, how did I start working on, paying more attention to synchronicities? It was very similar. It was like paying attention to where you feel these things in your body, because they're real. But if you don't believe in that, you're not going to, that's the first step in order to allowing yourself to even feel it at all. But there's like sort of a certain sensation that that you can't really describe. It's just there, a certain tightness or something. And, it's something I'm certainly working on a lot. This is very recent for me, that specific part. What
Yeah, it's
about
very
you?
individual for me as well. I know I feel a certain like energy in my solar plexus area, and then it's like suddenly a thought is there. And if I don't listen to that thought, it will just like keep repeating as if someone is just knocking inside of me until I listen and do it. So yeah, there's a certain feel to it that's hard to describe, and I know it's also very individual for everyone. So yeah, I'm always curious to hear other people how it shows for them, how their intuition shows for them, or how their yeah this inner exclamation mark like, hey, watch out, there's something for you to pay attention to. I find that super fascinating, the way how we're yeah tapped into that bigger energetic field, and how we read, everyone is reading it a bit differently, but noticing when there's something relevant for you or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back to that book, they talk about that a lot, right? Where, if you don't, I read it in Portuguese. So I think in the translation in English was probably uh, like your personal legend. Is that what they call it in English? Like if you don't follow your
uh,
personal legend or your personal story,
Legacy.
right? No, there's a
Legend.
term that they use in the book. In Portuguese, they saw it like you need to follow your personal legend, maybe your personal story, anyways, whatever the word is in English. That if you don't follow that, and you get those signs, you get that feeling, you and you don't act on it, like it stays there. It's going to continue bothering you. Like you might you can totally pretend you suffocated it, that you drowned it, and that it's gone. It's like, no, 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 I don't need to do that. It's like, no, if you really feel that and you don't act on it, it stays there and it keeps bothering you until you go. Somebody who just stays in their same little job for the rest of their life, because that's amazing for some people, to make it clear like there's nothing wrong with working one job for the rest for your whole life if that's what you really love and you really enjoy it, right? By all means. But a lot of people will do that out of fear, or out of just they're scared of what it might be outside of there, right? And it still stays there and bothers them. It's not because you just push that down and stay doing that one thing that's not going to continue to bother you there the whole entire time. And it's like at one point it just becomes so scary because it's been there for so long. It just becomes part of who you are almost. It's like you just start to identify with that feeling. You think, oh, this is the way it is. This is the way it is to be alive. This is the way I feel. It's not necessarily, it's just you held on to something for so long that it, ceased to be just a feeling, then it became a mood, then it became a personality trait, then it just kind of sort of became who you are. But it's never too late to get rid of it, I think.
Yeah, and if you then step out of it and you just learn how to trust that, to because it's also very much connected with uncertainty, right? To if you know you can trust yourself on picking up the right moments in time and picking up the right pointers into a direction, what should happen? I mean, then life can happen, but in every moment that's relevant for you, you can make sure that you'll be picking up on it, and you know where to go and you know how to handle it no matter what life throws your way, instead of trying to avoid and secure yourself of life throwing anything in your direction at all.
Yeah, just go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
Use that, simply put.
Yeah. Well, that was a little like detour from
Yeah,
our plant medicine topic, but
totally.
it's all
Well, and
connected,
so what
right?
are some of the other
So
ones that you've worked with? I mean, I know we've talked about this on the phone, but I'd like to talk again about, like, what are some of the other teachers that you've had the experience of working with, and how were they?
yeah, so mostly I work with ayahuasca and mushrooms. Those are also the two I work a lot with clients with. But I had my fair share of experiences with other plant and animal medicine as well. For example, with Bufo, or I've worked with some lesser known master plants called Toei and Datura. Um, had my experience with also synthetics. Although I have to say I'm really connected to the plant medicine because there is a certain type of plant consciousness, and you might share that experience that is really communicating with you, like as if the plant has a certain spirit, and in ceremony you establish the communication with it, and that's what I find super super beautiful.
Yeah, it's hard to explain that to somebody who's never jumped in, right? But I am 100% there with you. And I think there's some very interesting synthetics that you can do that do certainly serve a purpose. I don't think we need to like shy away from them entirely. I think I know of a lot of people who have had some very, 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 very
Mm-hmm.
profound experiences with acid, as so have I. But there's certainly not like a spirit there. It's not like you're dealing with an entity almost that you're conversing with, that you're learning from, right? Um, it's hard to put in words, right? If you've never been there, but you certainly have the um, the impression, at least, or this strong feeling that you are directly communicating to another being or another um, deity or personality in some sort, whether that's mushrooms or whether that's ayahuasca, whether that's peyote. And there's a reason that people, describe ayahuasca as a very feminine teacher and peyote as a very masculine teacher, for example. And like when you do them, that that could not become more obvious, at least to me, that it was alarmingly obvious how different both teachers tried to approach you in their method of teaching, and how doing peyote certainly felt like a dad versus ayahuasca kind of like a mom. And just how I was able to relate to each one of those, for better or worse, based on my previous experiences, right? Like for example, I grew up with a mom. I was always very, very, very tight with my mom. We have a really cool relationship. I did not grow up with a dad, and but everything, I feel like I overcame that pretty well. However, there's certain ways in which that still affects you, even if you try to ignore them, and if you know pretend like they're not there. They're there. There's some ways in which that affects you. That lack of a masculine role model in my life. And when I jumped into peyote for the first time, that was a heavy awakening for all of the healing that I had to do around my relationship to the masculine, and perhaps that a lot of the hyper masculinity in my life and how I present myself to the world had actually come from that lack of it in my life. And then it was like, oh wow, you need to go work on this. And I had been doing ayahuasca for years and years and years, and I had so many experiences with it. But that never came to me, and that never showed me that part that I needed to heal up until I jumped in with peyote. And I think it's interesting to show that these are all different tools. And there's no, if you go back to Carlos Castaneda, I don't know if you've read, his teachings of Don Juan. He talks heavily about, finding your ally. Go find what your ally is, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. And I don't know that it's the same for you all throughout your life. There's moments in your life which you need to learn, where you need to go through different lessons, or you need different teachers. Sometimes, like if you work so much on, like say you have a car and you need to fix it, and you can only work so much on the motor before the motor's good. There's nothing else you can do on it. You got to go work on the carburetor or whatever. So then you have to go use a different tool to go work on something else. And that's kind of where I felt like I got to, at a point where I had worked with ayahuasca so extensively, and just out of lack of opportunity really hadn't jumped into these other ones. And when I did, it was like, wow, there was so much more growth I could get from these, rather than just continuing on with that same teacher that had kind of really, I had, not exhausted its teachings, because there's so much more you can always learn. But I'd gotten to a point where it was beneficial to use a different tool for a different type of job in my life.
For me, it's also quite intuitive. It's not like a rational decision that I make saying, oh, now I sit with that specific medicine, or I sit with that specific medicine. It's more, it comes my way, or I feel drawn to it. And then for certain periods, I might be more in touch with one or the other. How was that for you? Was it
Well,
like a
it's
rational decision or?
yeah, I think it's an interesting question because uh, when you said that, the first thing that came to mind was like, well, yeah, maybe that is where I could use a little bit more of that feminine intuition, you know, and like see what's drawing me, where what's calling me. But I've always taken a very, you know, linear. I'm going to pursue this, or I'm going to pursue that, and a lot of so you know the answer is really that a lot of my decisions have really been. Um, Coming from me rather than waiting to see what's drawing me, you know. But on the other hand, I think that whenever an opportunity is presented to me, I'll jump on it, you know what I mean? And I think that is in a certain way that's kind of a, you know, way to listening to intuition, a way of listening to your, you know, to those signs. So for example, this, right? I mean, me going out to Mexico to go hang out with you, that's just somebody, just some synchronicity just popped into your lap. And a lot of people would sit around and wait and go like, oh, well, I don't know this person, you know, and I don't know if this is the right situation. But my first reaction is, okay, cool. Let me jump on a call with her. Let me see what this person's all about. Let me get a feel for her. I'm like, maybe I'll get on the phone and she's just fucking whack and I don't want to talk to her, you know? Maybe she'll be really cool. And then, you know, we'll totally vibe. And then having the balls to just go, get up and go, you know? And I have so much confidence in myself nowadays that I can read people and take care of myself, right? I mean, it helps a lot to, you know, to sometimes to be to be a big man. It's like you just kind of feel more comfortable. I can jump on a plane. I can go to the middle of the jungle in Mexico, and you know, I'll make sure you know, I do my part to make this experience what I want it to be as well. I don't feel as, you know,
Yeah,
as vulnerable sometimes.
personal agency. That's also what I feel throughout my plant medicine journey has developed more and more this like trust in yourself, getting to know yourself and really knowing that you are the creator and that you'll manage everything and that you can create anything as well.
Hmm. Yeah, there's certainly a point where, you know, it, irresponsibility does come in, right? That it is a thing. You can be irresponsible, but I feel like a lot of life is just you just kind of really trusting that things are going to work out and going. And I think that, you know, I mean, maybe bad things can happen, but I feel like when you just kind of embody that positivity, it's way less likely. And that's why when you go into a ceremony, for example, you're kind of right already. Whether you think you're going to have a bad trip or whether you think you're going to have a good trip, you've kind of already set that. When you jump in there, if you went in there thinking like, oh, this is going to be horrible, I'm going to have a bad trip, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, that's going to happen because you're bringing in that mindset, that energy, and that's just going to gravitate all of that negativity towards you, and it's just going to be really rough. And sometimes that's the awakening that people need. You know, it's like jump in there with this squeamish, you know, vulnerable feeling, and then just kind of recognizing in a journey that, oh wow, wait a second, I can shift this around. I can alchemize the feeling. I can sit down with a feeling of, you know, I'm not being secure in myself or of fear, and just turn that into courage and love. And sometimes that's when that happens is in that first journey that you jumped into, and you know, it was a little wake up call. Yeah, that's the way it was for me. Had a couple
But in
really
the
rough
end,
ones.
this turns into the golden nuggets that you take away from it, right? That you, when you integrate them, that's one of the learnings that you take away.
You cut off for a second. What did you say in the beginning?
I said that in the end, also those insights that, hey, this was me like going in uh, with that specific mindset, and then it
Sure.
happened. Then I basically created it. Like this insight is then something you, even if it was challenging for you in that case, you walk away with, and once you like are aware of it, you can integrate it and learn from it. So the
Yeah.
integration part, I also believe, is very important after the journeys.
Yeah. And kind of
I'm
building
curious,
that
do you
community.
like, yeah, do you have like a certain, because we also talked a lot about how like both of us are really taking the time to integrate, and how like important we view especially the time then after ceremony, where the actual work that starts, right, to put it into practice in daily life. I'm curious, do you have like a certain integration practice or tool that you just like to go back to that works really well for you?
Good question. Um, well, not to oversimplify it, but meditation is obviously a huge part of it, right? And when I say meditation, I use that in the broadest meaning way you could use that word. You know, when I say meditation, I'm talking about everything from, sitting there and just trying to empty your mind and just clear your thoughts and just let your brain just be free for a second. I'm also talking about, almost like even praying, really. Sometimes like I'll get into something which I don't know whether I call it praying or whether I call it meditation. It's just this giving gratitude and thanks for everything and just really focusing on that, right? And but just sitting there and really allowing yourself to kind of really feel what it is that now at this point that you need to feel, because like it's easy to do that in the ceremony, right? It's almost like, depending on which planet you're working with, it's almost like forced upon you. It's like, nah, bitch, you're not going to run away from this feeling. You got to feel this right now, and you can't run away from it, right? And that's a beautiful part of the psychedelics. That's what's awesome about them, is that they will sometimes force you to deal with an issue that you knew you had, you were just unwilling to deal with it, right? But as soon as you're off, that it starts to slowly creep back there, unless you have like a very intense behavioral change all of a sudden. Like it's that behavioral pattern is going to fall back in. So it's kind of like, whether you have to make notes, whether you have to write down what are some of the key points that you want to work on. And then one recommendation I make is like, don't take any like extreme actions right after. Let those lessons settle for like a couple weeks before you go break up with your girlfriend, or whether you go, run away from home or whatever. Chill for a second, let that digest, and just try to sit with that feeling and allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you learned during your, quote unquote ceremony, because it's still the ceremony, really, right? Like while you were sitting with the plant, and it showed you something, just making it an intention, like an explicit, go out of your way to make sure that you kind of put yourself back in there. It's like, oh wow, I felt that, and that really, really bothered me. I didn't like that. Okay, well, that's where you need to be. So go back and make sure when in your meditation, when you sit down with that specific thing that you didn't like. That's one of them.
Leaning into the trigger.
That's where the growth comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like the growth always comes from the places where you don't want to be. Not always, right? There's obviously you can achieve growth by, living in bliss and love, and that's where you want to be all the time. But sometimes like the triggers, if you're trying to solve heal the triggers, those are inherently places that you don't want to be, and you have to force yourself to go there.
Yeah, by now I learned to develop like a love-hate relationship with triggers. I notice when they come up, and then I'm like, oh gosh, I would rather avoid it, but let me see what this is about. And there's almost like a curiosity to it, to explore it further and see what it will do to you once you like go into that dark cave and explore
and sometimes facing it and just facing it and just allowing yourself to sit with that uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes also like learning to alchemize it, right? It's like, okay, well, I'll sit with it. What can I learn from this? But then the ultimate goal should really be, okay, well, I'm going to sit with it to learn from it in order to get to know it, in order to be able to alchemize it into something else. And when I was, a second ago, I said that there's a million different ways in which I'll meditate, for lack of a better, more specific word. Sometimes I've done this a lot recently, where when I sit down to meditate, what I'm really doing is just intentionally trying to alchemize a certain feeling into another feeling. Like if I sit down and there's, something triggered me, there's something that's really been bothering me, I will sit down there and really, really, really try to feel that specific feeling for that one thing that that person said, or that whatever she did. And then allow myself to sit with it long enough, and then intentionally shift it over into something else. Like, okay, well, this was making me angry, and it would make me feel this certain something in my solar plexus, right? Or down in my root chakra or whatever. And then think whatever it is that you have to do in the beginning to learn how to slowly, change that over, whether you need to start thinking loving thoughts and thinking about the good things that you've been over with that person, you shift that over into love, right? And then little by little, you learn to do that without having to go through this whole process of, okay, let me now think of something very beautiful that we went through together and try to like use that as a trigger to bring in a good feeling. You start to learn how to do it just automatically. I don't have to sit there and do all that. So that's a big tool that I've been using lately as well, with or without plant medicine. It's something. I actually did it on a plant medicine journey, on a Wachuma journey not too long ago. That was like my entire journey was just sitting there going through all of the triggers that I needed to deal with. Okay, this person did that person did this, and okay, let's work on them. And you sit there and you think about this person. Okay, well, I'll alchemize it into something else. Okay, next person, let's go work on it. Let's go work on my relationship to you. And what you end up recognizing is like, this is all shit you need to fix. They don't need to fix anything. This is all right here. Everything that needs to be fixed is right here. It's not them. You take that responsibility.
We are responsible for what we're feeling, right? That's such a hard learning in the beginning, when we're like, oh no, shit, it's not them. It's me. I need to take care of it. It's easier to just like blame it on someone else, and I'm definitely also in the past I've been a big blamer. But now I take responsibility for my stuff, and it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable, but
it's very rarely
to ourselves that we have to do it.
Yeah, I think it's always been very hard. But when you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, like it doesn't matter whether you shouldn't be thinking about like whether it's easy or whether you have a reason to. Maybe you have an amazing reason. Maybe you have the perfect reason to be pissed off at that person. Maybe you have the best justification in the world to hold on to anger and to continue pissed off. But from a pragmatic perspective, it really doesn't get you anywhere. And I always try to look at things from a pragmatic perspective, right? It's like, yeah, I could argue this. I could articulate an argument as to why I am entitled to feel this way. But at the end of the day, if I really look at whether this is serving me or not, it's not. Like, as hard as it might be sometimes to say, fuck it, you're forgiven. Like, I love you so much. That's all that matters. Because they really did genuinely do something totally wrong, totally messed up. You don't deserve my apology. Maybe that's all true. But pragmatically, it's only eaten me up by sitting here with that feeling. And that's kind of where, I try to rationalize taking this approach.
Totally, because you're tying up your own energy, right? You're thinking about it. That's mental energy. You're feeling it. That's emotional energy. So by just like letting it go and feeling it and letting it pass, you're freeing all that capacity to use for something else, something that you actually want, that you actually maybe want to create or focus on.
Yep.
So once you make that shift and notice, no, actually, the only one I'm hurting with this is myself. It gets easier.
Yeah. Take that responsibility, and then you just recognize that you're you're hurting yourself by doing that. And yeah, maybe you might be hurting them too. And maybe that brings you a good feeling. You know, it's like, oh, I got them back. But, you know, I don't think you should ever go out of your way to harm somebody if that's not, you know, maybe sometimes there is justification in going out of your way to doing something that's going to harm somebody if there really is some overall benefit to everyone around you and yourself. You know, I mean, maybe killing Hitler was a good thing, is, you know, in other words. But, you know, going out of your way to harm somebody when it's really just taking up your own time and not benefit you or anybody around you at all, that's like a net negative. That's like a loss here because, yeah, you got back at them, a loss here because I wasted all my time. And who's better off right now? It sounds like nobody, right? And I really try to identify those circumstances sometimes and go, oh wow, wait a second, I could I could go out of my way to do this, but nobody's getting anything out of it. Me, my mom, you know, her, him. So just chill, let it go. And it's hard. It's really, 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 really hard to do that, especially as a knee jerk reaction, right? It's one thing to learn how to like be able to sit down, meditate, go over it, rationalize it, and then go, okay, yeah, I better not do that. But like when you're at like yogi status, that's when it's just like it becomes your knee jerk reaction. That's your first reaction. It's like, oh no, no, let it go. It's cool. And that's where I would love to get at some point in my life. I'm not there.
But very often it's so visceral, it's just in you, and then this emotional reaction is happening and it's already on the way, and there's no way how to stop it. Then you just
Yeah.
have to feel it.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was very much like what I told you about after the darkroom retreat when I was doing that energy work. It was like, no, really, just kind of like get to know that feeling. It's cool. And there was this one point where she, you know, we were talking about something. She could tell I got a little bit flustered about it. I raised my voice. I got a little, my veins popped up in my neck, and then she's like, okay, wait a second, calm down. And she didn't say calm down. She said, wait a second. So what do you feel right now? She asked me to describe it. I'm like, okay, wow, no, I feel this. Okay, sit down with it, really sit inside. What exactly do you feel? And I started to describe like, exactly what I felt like in the solar plexus. And she's like, okay, well, I invite you to just sit with that for a little while. Like, just allow it to be there. Took a few minutes, you know, wasn't quick. And I sat there with it for several minutes. And I'm like, okay, well, how about now? And I'm like, oh, doesn't seem nearly as threatening anymore. Like, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. And then little by little, I was able to kind of like play with, you know, how it connected to the rest of my body. It's this one localized place where it really, really
Mm.
bothers you, but then you kind of recognize that it's just kind of part of this bigger flow of energy. And right above it felt really amazing. It's like, okay, but don't just live there. Like, stay down here intensely just so you get used to that. You know, it's kind of, you know, as a fighter, right? Like I've always been into martial arts throughout growing up, and it's the same thing with getting into fighting. And sometimes like you get punched in the face, and it's like the first time it's like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. You think you're gonna die, right? And then it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, right? And then you learn to maneuver and kind of navigate that terrain in a fight where you're not so like squeamish and every single like somebody, you know, puts up and you have to like jump back and protect your face because it's like, oh no, that's scary, but it's not that big of a deal either. You know, like I don't want to get hit, but I don't need to just permanently be in the sphere. And then only when you learn that it doesn't hurt that bad, it's actually okay, is when you can learn to actually like counterattack or navigate that, you know, to bob and weave. Similar.
The emotional reaction itself in the body, I think, is not even like a minute. If you really allow it, if you don't suppress it, if you let it flow through you, then it's almost not even a minute at peak, and then it already wears off. So
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah,
allowing
but
it.
if you want it to, right? Otherwise, because I'll let it sit there for 2 weeks sometimes, you know, get better. Like,
That's the other thing, like perpetuating it, that's
yeah,
also not good to just like indulge in that. But most often if we do that, there's also we get some form of benefit by indulging in it. We might not be consciously aware of it, but there's always a reason why.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And I think I talked about that in that other podcast I did after the dark room, right, where I talked about, perpetuating the negative feelings. And for some reason, I can speak for myself. And I think a lot of people don't, they don't perpetuate the good feelings. Those are probably the ones you should be perpetuating, right? The good ones just kind of come in and then you just lose them right after, and the bad ones, they come in there and you consciously decide or unconsciously decide to just circulate them around and send them in this little, black box machine that just makes them bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you let them go. But by then, it's like, you sat there with that unnecessary feeling for hours or weeks at a time, For some, and I
That
don't
it
know
gets
why.
so
Maybe,
familiar and it feels so normal.
yeah, yeah,
You're basically reconditioning yourself that this is just normal for you to feel. And then there's some form of almost safety and familiarity in that pain, which is not healthy and not good. And that's yeah,
yeah,
when you're perpetuating it.
yeah. I
So
wonder if
fine
there's
line to
some,
balance.
yeah, I wonder if there's some like biological reason behind, evolutionarily, why is it that we attach to these negative feelings a little more than the positive ones? And I want, maybe it's because, like, if we just sat there in bliss, the like, I love my, when we're monkeys, I love my monkey mama so much. So all of a sudden the saber-tooth tiger comes and gets you, right? It's like you have to kind of be on the lookout, right? You have to be, oh wow, they ate Fred the other day. Fuck that. Well, I don't want to be here. You need to be like kind of attached to that negative feeling to keep yourself alive, right? As opposed to, but nowadays we don't really live in that situation. We live in such comfort that if you allow yourself to stick on to these negative feelings, it doesn't really, I don't think there's a biological purpose for that anymore. I think that way back when, if we didn't like really stick on to those negative emotions, we were going to end up dead, eaten by a tiger or whatever. Nowadays, I think like since we've exited outside of that survival mode, now it's time to like work on these things that allow us to strive a little more in our emotions rather than just survive on the planet.
But at the same time, we've like taken things that are not actually a threat anymore and created them into such a threat that it creates this emotional reaction in the physical body. So
Yeah,
that's yeah, that's very strange.
yeah,
But that's how we humans work.
yeah, certainly. Well, I'm very much looking forward to next week. If you want to just kind of give everybody a little, shout about what exactly we're doing next week. I think there's
Oh yeah,
some
so
extra spaces over there as well, right? In case somebody wants to jump in.
yeah, we have like one spot, and we thought we maybe play it as a wild card, and as it was so synchronistically how we connected, we're more or less like curious to see what else synchronicity and who else synchronicity can bring in. So the retreat that's going to happen in Mexico as like a 6 day immersion around the topic of conscious leadership, like how do I lead myself, and from that, like from an authentic place, and what does that then mean for, I don't know, the team that I'm leading, or my life design, or the company that I'm leading, and weaving in different holistic practices to really open you up to your own truth and to get deep down to what's important for you, what's authentic for you. And the ayahuasca ceremony will be one important part in that. So it's gonna be a very beautiful journey, very beautiful experience in a very, very playful jungle eco lodge. Just the venue itself will like trigger your imagination and create a different reality for you. So we thought we just put it out there and see if there's anyone who would want to sit in the circle with us,
Mhm.
who like right now feels this intuitive hunch. That's me, and synchronistically I ended up now watching this. Please reach out, and
Yeah,
we'll have a,
reach out to Katya.
oh,
She will be able to give
exactly.
you more information about it. And I like what you just mentioned about it right now, about the fact that the ayahuasca ceremony is only one small part of this. Drives back to that point that we were trying to drive home, right? That it's more about integration than it is about sitting in a ceremony for a few hours. And I think this is the way most places should approach it. Like sometimes you go to these retreats and it's all about doing 5, 6, 7 different ceremonies. And, if you don't save enough time for integration, it's so easy to come home and lose sight of that. So, the fact that this is one little day out of 6 days, and on the other 6 days, we're working on totally different things. I think that sounds very powerful to me. I think that's a good idea, and I think it's an approach a lot more people should take when looking into working with these teachers as well.
Yeah, to also give them time, because in the end, it's I also see a lot like, oh, how can this medicine help me? What can the plant do for me? But in the end, it's about reversing the question, like, how can I actually serve the medicine? How can I serve the plant? How can I take those insights that have been given to me in ceremony and really implement them in my life to take the direction I'm supposed to take from a heart centered place. So you probably also made the experience that in the time of integration afterwards, sometimes like information dropping in, it's not just in ceremony, but that you have revelations or insights in the days or weeks after, or even months after to come, so that this time is actually also a very valuable time to give attention to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, if you want to reach out to Katja Wallisch and
Do
ask
that,
any more
because
questions
Dom
about
is
that.
usually not
Yeah,
reading
I'm a
his
little
messages.
overwhelmed with my DMs. And she's going to be able to give you a lot more info about it anyways. And, if you guys have any questions about her coaching that she does, outside of this ceremony that has nothing to do with this ceremony, encourage you guys to reach out to her. Reach out to me too, but I'm a little busy. And love, it's always such a pleasure to speak to you. Every time we get on the phone, every time we talk, I have the most amazing time, and I am certainly looking forward to sitting down with both you and my mom. I don't know, that's the one thing that a lot of people might not know is I'm so blessed. I'm so fucking blessed to not be on this journey alone by myself, being able to share this with some key members of my family, really my mom, and other people too, but having this, having a strong community around you is just so important, right? It's so important for maintaining what it is that you learn, and kind of having people to keep you in check when you fall back into those behavioral patterns where you don't want to be. And, whether that's your family, whether that's your close friends, it's so amazing to have that. And I just feel so blessed that I'm in that boat, and I'm looking forward for you to meeting her in person as well. And
Yeah, me too. I find it so beautiful that you can share this with your mom. That's one of my dreams, to maybe one day share the space with my parents. I
yeah,
don't know if that will ever happen. Mom, if you hear this now, I know dein Englisch ist nicht so gut, aber vielleicht,
yeah.
vielleicht
Herr
bekomme ich
Weilich,
mich irgendwann mal. Yeah, so
wo bist du?
that's a very beautiful thing
Yeah,
to do. So I'm very, very happy for you and looking forward to meet you both in person.
yeah. Looking forward to it. I always have the most amazing time talking to you, and thank you so much. Bye.
Sending much love. Bye.
Sending much love back to you and received. Bye bye.